In today's video, I want to talk about the best time to trade. However, this is not going to be based on which markets are active or in session, since we can usually find markets that match the time of day that we want to trade anyway. This is more about what time is actually right for you to be able to reach your peak performance. And believe me, it does make a huge difference. As you'll find out later, when you get this wrong, your cognitive function can reduce by as much as 20%. Now, this is especially important for those of you that are trading around a work schedule, your 9-to-5 job or whatever schedule you're on, and it will help you to try and find the right time for you to trade around that restriction that you have. Now, some of the things that we're going to discuss are things that I've briefly mentioned before, and all of it comes from actual studies that were done rather than just anecdotal evidence. And if you want to know more, I think a really great book that really breaks down all of this in a nice, easy to understand way, in basically a summary format, is the book When by Daniel Pink. So I'd recommend checking it out and then maybe doing some extra reading around the topic if you want to. But anyway, let's get into it. Our cognitive ability to a large extent is dictated by our circadian rhythm. This is what sometimes people refer to as your body clock. And although these circadian rhythms do take place even in the cells of individual organs in your body, there's an overall master pacemaker known as your SCN, which stands for your suprachiasmatic nucleus. And excuse my pronunciation as always, I always get them wrong when they're long words like that. But basically, this is a cluster of around 200,000 cells that's the size of a grain of rice located in the hypothalamus. This SCN controls the rise and fall in our body temperature and regulates our hormones. It helps us to sleep at night and to wake up in the morning. Yes, that's right, teenagers, your body can wake up in a routine without an alarm clock and without your parents shouting at you. However, the cycle that the SCN runs on is actually 24 hours and 11 minutes, which is a bit more than a typical day. So instead, the body aligns itself with social and environmental signals to match the internal cycle of your body clock with the external cycle of night and day on Earth. Now, this is a process known as entrainment, and in some situations, if your sleeping pattern is really bad, your body will struggle with entrainment and you'll find it difficult to match your internal body clock with daylight or darkness. You'll start not being able to detect when it's light or dark anymore. This circadian rhythm leads us to going through different feelings of energy throughout the day. Typically, most people will go through a cycle each day that involves a peak, followed by a trough, and then recovery. In general, the peak will happen in the morning after waking up until about lunchtime when there's the trough, when that starts throughout the afternoon, before then eventually picking up again at the start of the evening when the recovery begins to take place. Now, I'm sure most of us know that feeling of the afternoon slump when you feel extremely tired and sluggish and you see in the office people walking around like zombies. So we've all experienced it. When it comes to trading or any other day-to-day work, most people will follow like a daily routine of, for example, working a 9-to-5, starting at 9 a.m. in the morning and then finishing work at 5 p.m. or something like that. However, this means that you're also working during that slump in the afternoon when not much is happening, and sometimes people will depend on that afternoon, but this is definitely not optimal. Most people would therefore expect that their best performance is going to happen in the morning when they have the most energy. However, this as well is not necessarily true either, as it depends on the type of work and the type of person that you are. Let me explain. When we wake up, our body temperature slowly rises, and as it rises, that increasing temperature starts to boost our energy levels and our alertness. Now, this process leads to some of our abilities being tuned in and enhanced. So, during the morning session, after waking up, your executive functioning is improved. Your ability to concentrate and your powers of deduction are much higher. And yes, I said your powers of deduction, not powers of seduction. I think that one may be better kept for the evening or nighttime when you're going to bed. So based on this, for most of us, our analytic qualities are peaking in the late morning or early lunchtime. So if we want to perform analysis or do something that requires full concentration, that's the best time to do it. But that's not all. For traders, this is especially important since this time of day is when our vigilance is at its best as well. Now, our vigilance is going to help us to stick with a system better and not to deviate from the rules. We can be very controlled about what we're doing. So the morning brings us to our peak with analytical qualities and vigilance, which is a great situation for traders. However, around midday, these qualities begin to reverse. Our vigilance reaches its limit, which means that at that point, we may start to run on our gut feeling, our instincts, or stereotypes, irrelevant information, irrational logic, rather than sticking to the logical and systematic approach that we needed for our trading and the one that we had during our morning session. In addition to this, our energy levels and alertness levels plummet at this time of day as well. So at this point, when it comes to analytical work like trading that requires, top focus, our performance can change later in the day quite dramatically, from midday onwards, that afternoon session. Our cognitive abilities can suffer by as much as 20%. Some studies even show that the effect on performance is the same as drinking the legal limit of alcohol. So it's sort of like trading after a pint or two, which is not good unless you've had a particularly bad day. And in fact, speaking of bad days, it's also found that we're more positive in the mornings. So as we hit our midday slump and a few hours after that, we become more negative. Since trading is so heavily dependent on good psychology, the positivity is exactly what we need. We don't need that negativity in our life. No, thank you, sir. However, later in the day, we start to go through our recovery phase, like I mentioned before. But something changes in us at that point. So it's not like we're recovering and being back to how we were in the morning, because we're no longer optimal for analytical tasks. Instead, we're more in tune for solving insight problems and doing more creative work. Although our energy levels are picking up at that point, we don't have the same vigilance as we did in the morning session. Instead, it's this lack of vigilance, but with heightened energy levels, that allows us to think more creatively, to find solutions from outside the box. That will allow us to make links and connections that we wouldn't have thought possible before. We can connect things together and understand things. So essentially, at this time of day, we would have more opportunity to experience what's called a flash of illuminance. So what does this mean? Well, basically, when we're doing our analysis, any lack of inhibitions or lack of vigilance may lead us to deviating from our rules and our system. So the afternoon may not be the best for trading, but for making discoveries or figuring out a problem, it may be exactly what we need. It's what some people refer to as the inspiration paradox. Innovation and creativity are greatest when we are not at our best from a circadian rhythm point of view, when we're in that recovery stage. So just to reiterate, your trading, since it's analytical and requires a systematic approach, is better suited to the morning session, whereas any sort of creative thinking or problem solving is more likely to be better in the afternoon when you have that recovery phase, whereas the slump in the middle is not good for anything. So this would be the time of day, that slump time of day would be better for completing any admin stuff that you need to do, things where you don't necessarily need to think too much about what you're actually doing. Now, it's important to be extra certain that your circadian rhythm matches the one that we just discussed, because not everyone has the same body clock alignment. We all have a different chronotype, and a small amount of people will actually experience the exact opposite of what we just discussed. In other words, they're not going to experience what we said was peak, then trough, then recovery. Instead, they'll experience it in reverse, and they'll go through recovery, trough, and then peak. What I mean by this is that some people may be morning people, they have an early chronotype, whereas other people might be night people and have a late chronotype. And if you look online, you can find assessments where you fill in a range of questions to find out what your exact chronotype is. And this includes the Munich Chronotype Questionnaire, which is one of the better ones. However, to put it simply, if you didn't have any commitments the next day, like if you were on holiday or something like that, the time you would naturally go to bed and wake up can give you a good indication of what chronotype you are. And in fact, if we look at the midpoint of people's sleep, so right in between going to sleep and waking up, when there are no commitments the next day, if it falls between 12 a.m. and 3:30 a.m., the midpoint of your sleep, that's an early chronotype, which accounts for 14% of people. If it's between 6 a.m. and 12 p.m., you're a late chronotype, which is about 21% of people. And anything in the middle of those is the average, which is about 65% of people. So that 20% of people that are night people will experience the reverse of what we discussed before. That means that since they go through their recovery period in the morning, they're more suited to creative or innovative type work, like brainstorming, that kind of thing. That's what they should be doing in the morning. And then after their slump in the afternoon, they'll start to hit their peak in terms of alertness and energy, and that's when they should be doing their analytical work, like trading. Your chronotype can be affected by a range of different factors. For example, age can really make a difference. Kids, like young kids, are more likely to be early chronotypes, but then they move on to being like night walker type people when they hit their teen years. And I'm sure we all know about parents shouting at their teenagers to get out of bed and be more productive during school holidays. However, over the age of 50, people become more suited to early mornings. In fact, another factor is your sex, as women are more likely to be early chronotypes and men are late types. These chronotypes don't only affect the type of work you should do at specific points in time, but they also lead to different characteristics in people in general. For example, morning people are meant to be more pleasant and productive. They're generally more emotionally stable, persistent, conscientious, and introverted. They can suppress bad impulses, they can take initiative, and they're more inclined to plan for the future, which are obviously all pretty good traits for traders. These people are also seen as being more happy and positive. Great stuff. On the other hand, night people are the darker people. Maybe they're vampires, who knows? These people are more open and extroverted and are seen as being more neurotic, more impulsive and sensation seeking. They're like the live for the moment type of people, which are obviously not good signs for trading. You might end up gambling rather than doing things in a strategic way. But if you understand these aspects, it is something that can obviously be controlled. This type is also more likely to use stimulants and things like alcohol, caffeine, cigarettes, and other drugs. They're more likely to suffer from addictions and eating disorders, diabetes, depression, unfortunately, and infidelity, not that that's related to trading. This all doesn't sound so great for night people, but luckily they've also been seen to display greater creativity, better working memory, and higher intelligence scores. So maybe it somehow balances out. Now, as you can imagine, understanding your chronotype can help you for understanding how you may want to position your trading or the type of controls that you need to put in place to make sure you're able to stick to your system and do things well. It also is going to influence the time of day that you focus on the activity of trading itself. So as I said, as long as we understand these factors, we can work with them rather than against them. Essentially, the most important part comes down to actually matching the time of day that you're doing trading or any other task with the actual chronotype that you are. So matching the time of day with the task. This is known as the Synchrony Effect. And for 80% of the population, it will be the typical circadian rhythm that I described at the start. So that will mean analytical work in the morning, like trading, admin work in the afternoon, maybe filling in your trading journal, and creative or insight work in the evening, maybe looking for where the links are and the consistency in what you're doing. Now, before we wrap up the video, I want to leave you with a little tip that Daniel Pink talks about in his book that I mentioned at the start, and this is going to allow you to be even more productive during the afternoon slump. Now, I love the name that he refers to it as. He refers to it as a nappuccino. You basically down a cup of coffee, understanding that the caffeine takes 25 minutes to get into your system fully. You then go and have a nap for 20 to 25 minutes in the afternoon, knowing it takes about 7 minutes typically for people to fall asleep. And then it's really important that you set an alarm so that you don't sleep in for longer. You stick to that 20 to 25 minutes. Because if you sleep for longer, you'll suffer from sleep inertia, which makes you feel more groggy and tired. If you sleep for longer than 10 minutes, you'll experience a boost in your cognitive ability in the afternoon, but beyond that 25 minutes or longer, you're going to start to feel groggy. But anyway, if you want to know more about that and the other things that we've discussed in this video, I would definitely recommend checking out the book When by Daniel Pink, as I said at the start. And no, I'm not sponsored by that book for this video. It's just one of many books I've read, which I thought when I was reading it, like this could be really beneficial to traders and in fact for people working in general. So I wanted to share it with you in this video. If you like this video, please do hit the thumbs up button, leave any questions or comments below, and why not subscribe and then switch on notifications to the little bell so that you don't miss any of our other videos. I'm off now for a little nappuccino. Thanks for watching, I will see you soon.